I'd like to begin by asking Dr. Szasz this question. Suppose that we were to come upon a man who thought he could fly and was constantly ending up in the hospital where the psychiatric staff denominated him a, to use a non-technical term, hallucinator. Suppose that X-rays showed no apparent malformation in his brain. Suppose then that on his terminal attempt to fly, say from the 20th floor of the Waldorf Astoria, his corpse was taken off to the morgue, where a post-mortem revealed that in fact there was brain damage. Why mightn't one conclude that in fact his hallucination was a result of mental illness which retrospectively would have justified an attempt to protect him against himself?
It is quite possible for someone to have a brain disease and as a result of that to have a malfunctioning behavior. What we do with such a person is in part a political question. Does he have free will and responsibility? That is, if someone exhibits that kind of behavior, at the very least he ought to be warned not to jump out of buildings, taking literally a somewhat contrived example. Now, if he understands that warning and nevertheless goes to the trouble of jumping out, then a philosophical question arises which really goes to the heart of the way you phrase the question, and that is, you said he thinks he can fly. Now, you know very well that you don't know what anyone thinks. You only know what he tells you. Now, maybe he wants to kill himself. We don't know what anyone thinks. The very idea that people have a disorder of thought is part of the psychiatric semantic trickery. When are we justified in interfering in someone's life against his will? Because presumably this gentleman has already been told that he can't fly, because you mentioned that this was the nth time he has done that.
That's right, that's right.
So then it would be reasonable to assume that maybe he doesn't want to listen to those who tell him that what he's doing is not so. In other words, that he's wrong. If I can use my analogy here, supposing you tell a Christian scientist that it's very helpful to get a blood transfusion, a Jehovah's Witness, excuse me, to get a blood transfusion if you lose blood, and he doesn't listen. See, how do you deal? Now that's a real phenomenon. That's not as contrived as your example.
That's right. Well, that